White woman snatched black Air Marshal's seat, then froze when he put her on the no-fly list. "This isn't the back of the bus, and I'm certainly not moving for someone dressed like help," Francesca Wilde spat, her voice slicing through the first-class cabin like a diamond cutter. She didn't just look at Bryce Donovan. She looked through him, dismissing his existence with a wave of a manicured hand. "I paid for comfort, not to be loomed over by a thug in a hoodie. Now get out of my face before I make a phone call that ends your entire bloodline." Bryce didn't blink. He didn't shout. The cabin went deathly silent as he slowly reached into his jacket. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble of thunder, "you really should have checked the manifest." The recycled air inside the cabin of Flight 82, a direct red eye from Los Angeles to New York, already smelled of stale coffee and the cloying scent of expensive, heavy perfume. For Bryce Donovan, it smelled like another long night at the office. Bryce stood at the threshold of the aircraft, adjusting the strap of his nondescript duffel bag. At 6'4" with shoulders that could block out the sun, Bryce was used to taking up space, but he spent his professional life trying to disappear. He wasn't just a passenger. He was a federal air marshal, the highest authority on this vessel once the doors closed. Tonight, however, his posture screamed exhaustion. He had been awake for 36 hours, following a high-risk extraction in San Diego, and all he wanted was the specific seat assigned to him for tactical visibility. 1A. He rubbed a hand over his shaved head, his dark skin catching the harsh overhead fluorescent lights, and moved down the jet bridge. He wasn't in a suit today. He was in cover, dark jeans, a charcoal hoodie, and Timberland boots. To the untrained eye, he looked like a construction worker or maybe an off-duty athlete. To Francesca Wilde, he looked like a problem. Bryce stepped into the first-class cabin and stopped dead. Seat 1A was occupied. It wasn't just occupied, it was colonized. A woman sat there, draped in a cream-colored cashmere shawl that probably cost more than Bryce's first car. She was blonde, perfectly coiffed, with sunglasses on despite the dim cabin lighting. She had kicked off her heels, her stockinged feet resting audaciously on the bulkhead wall. Her bag, a burnt orange Birkin, was sitting on the seat next to her, effectively claiming 1B as well. This was Francesca Wilde, the heiress to the Wilde Hotel fortune, a socialite whose face graced the tabloids as often for her philanthropy as for her public meltdowns. She was 45, beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, and she radiated an aura of untouchable entitlement. Bryce took a breath, centering himself. He needed that seat. It wasn't about leg room. 1A offered a direct line of sight to the cockpit door and the galley, the two most vulnerable points on the aircraft. It was a strategic necessity. "Excuse me, miss," Bryce said, his voice calm, pitched low to avoid disturbing the other passengers settling in. Francesca didn't move. She was tapping furiously on her phone, her long acrylic nails clicking against the glass. "Miss," Bryce repeated, slightly louder. Francesca sighed, a dramatic exhalation that involved her entire upper body. She lowered her sunglasses just enough to peer over the rim. Her eyes were ice blue and cold as the Atlantic. She scanned Bryce from his boots to his hoodie, her lip curling in distaste. "Service entrance is in the back," she said, turning her attention back to her phone. "And I asked for a sparkling water 5 minutes ago. Chop, chop." Bryce felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. The ancient, burning frustration of being judged not by his character or his rank, but by the melanin in his skin and the clothes on his back. He pushed it down. He was a professional. "I'm not the flight attendant," Bryce said, stepping closer. "And you're in my seat, 1A. I need you to move." Francesca laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She finally looked up at him fully, removing her glasses. "You? In 1A?" She gestured around the cabin, where businessmen in suits and minor celebrities were watching with guarded interest. This is first class. The upgrades for people like you usually happen when the flight is empty. It's not empty. I'm sitting here. I have a boarding pass, Bryce said, reaching for his pocket. And this isn't a debate. Oh, it's certainly not a debate, Francesca snapped. I am Francesca Wilde. My family practically built this airline's reputation. I decided I wanted the window seat, so I took it. My assistant handled the details. If you have a ticket for 1A, it's clearly a clerical error. Go find a seat in economy. I'm sure you'll fit in better there. Brooks Hale, the lead flight attendant, hurried over. Brooks was a man in his 30s, with a nervous energy and a smile that looked plastered on with glue. He had seen Francesca board and had been dreading this moment. He knew who she was, and he knew she was a nightmare. He didn't know who Bryce was yet. Is there a problem here? Brooks asked, his voice pitching up an octave. Yes, Francesca declared, pointing a manicured finger at Bryce. This man is harassing me. He's looming. It's threatening. Remove him. Bryce turned his gaze to Brooks. I'm supposed to be in 1A. She's in my seat. Brooks looked at Bryce's attire, then at Francesca's glare. He made the calculation most people made in a split second. Appease the rich woman, manage the guy in the hoodie. Sir, Brooks said, his voice dropping to a condescending whisper. Let me see your boarding pass. Bryce handed it over. Brooks scanned it, his brow furrowing. It was marked Priority, Federal. But Brooks was too flustered to process the code properly. He just saw the seat number. Look, sir, Brooks stammered, sweating under Francesca's gaze. Ms. Wilde is, well, she's already settled. We have a lovely seat in 4B. It's still first class. Maybe we just... No, Bryce said. 1A. It's a security protocol. Security? Francesca scoffed loudly. You think you're security? What, are you a mall cop who won the lottery? Listen to me, you giant waste of space. I am not moving. I don't care if you have a ticket. I don't care if you're the Pope. You are intimidating, you are aggressive, and you are dirtying my air. Get out. From across the aisle, in seat 2C, a woman named Margot Brooks, no relation to the flight attendant, quietly pulled out her phone. She propped it against her purse, leaving the camera lens exposed. Margot was a criminal defense attorney, and she knew a civil rights violation when she saw one. She hit record. The air in the cabin had thickened, charged with static tension. The ambient noise of the terminal outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the sharp, staccato rhythm of Francesca's insults. Bryce Donovan stood his ground, his feet planted shoulder-width apart. He was trying to give her an out. He was trying to let her save face. But Francesca Wilde wasn't interested in saving face. She was interested in dominance. I'm going to ask you one last time, Bryce said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet register that made rookie cops tremble. Vacate the seat. Now. Francesca stood up. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", but her rage gave her height. She stepped into Bryce's personal space, poking a finger into his chest. Don't you dare command me, she hissed. Do you know who I am? I can buy this plane and turn it into scrap metal. I can have your job, whatever pathetic job it is, taken away before we even take off. I don't sit behind people like you. I don't breathe the same air as people like you unless you're serving me a drink. Ma'am, please, Brooks Hale tried to intervene, sensing the volatility. Let's just cool down. Shut up, Francesca screamed at the flight attendant. She turned back to Bryce. You're trying to steal my seat. You're a thief. That's what you people do, isn't it? Take what you didn't earn. The slur hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Margot Brooks, watching from 2C, gasped audibly. Several other passengers murmured. A businessman in 3A closed his laptop, his eyes wide. Bryce's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. The fatigue vanished, replaced by the sharp clarity of the job. She had crossed the line from difficult passenger to security threat. She was disrupting the flight crew, she was belligerent, and she was escalating a conflict in a secure environment. You're done, Bryce said. I'm done? Francesca laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. I'm calling the police. I'm having you arrested for assault. You touched me. Everyone saw it. He pushed me. She threw herself back into the seat, clutching her pearls in a performance worthy of a soap opera. He attacked me. Help! Someone help! Brooks Hale looked terrified. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step off the plane. We can't have this. You want me to step off? Bryce asked, looking at the flight attendant. Yes, now, Brooks cried, panicked. Fine, Bryce said. But first, we're going to clarify the chain of command here. Bryce reached inside his hoodie. Francesca screamed, He's got a gun! Passengers ducked. Brooks Hale actually squeaked and covered his head. Bryce withdrew a leather wallet. He flipped it open with a snap of his wrist. The gold badge of the Federal Air Marshal Service caught the light, gleaming with an authority that silenced the room instantly. Beneath it was his ID, identifying him as a senior federal agent. Bryce Donovan. Federal Air Marshal, he announced, his voice projecting to the back of the cabin. I am the ranking law enforcement officer on this aircraft, and under 49 U.S. Code Section 46504, interference with a flight crew member or attendant is a federal felony. He looked down at Francesca, who was frozen mid-fake sob. Her mouth hung open, her eyes darting from the badge to his face. You stole that, she stammered, though her voice lacked its previous fire. You found that. Or it's fake. It's real, Bryce said. And so is the federal authority that comes with it. You are currently interfering with a federal agent's duties and disrupting the operation of this aircraft. I gave you a chance to move. Now you've made it a federal matter. I know Connor Pierce, Francesca blurted out, naming the senior vice president of operations for the airline. He's a personal friend. I'll call him right now. You can't arrest me. I'm Francesca Wilde. I don't care if you know the president, Bryce said, pulling a pair of flex cuffs from his back pocket. You are creating a security hazard. Brooks, call the captain. Tell him we have a level 2 disturbance in first class. We aren't going anywhere until this passenger is removed. Francesca's face went from pale to a mottled red. Removed? Me? You can't remove me. I'm the victim here. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers trembling. Connor! I'm calling Connor. You're dead. You're so dead. Bryce stood impassive, a statue of justice in a hoodie. Make your call, but do it from the jet bridge. The standoff had lasted only 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. The captain had emerged from the cockpit, a gray-haired veteran named Captain Miller. Miller looked at the badge, then at Bryce, and gave a sharp nod. He knew the protocol. If a FAM, Federal Air Marshal, said someone was a threat, they were a threat. Ms. Wilde, Captain Miller said, his voice weary, you need to gather your belongings and exit the aircraft. I am on the phone with Connor Pierce, Francesca shrieked. She had the phone pressed to her ear, her other hand gesticulating wildly. Yes, Connor, a madman. He has a fake badge. He's threatening me. The pilot is in on it. They're ganging up on me. She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. A smug smile slowly spread across her face. She held the phone out toward Bryce. He wants to talk to you, she said, her voice dripping with venomous triumph. Bryce ignored the phone. I don't answer to airline management. I answer to the Department of Homeland Security. Take the phone, Francesca yelled. Brooks Hale, trying to salvage his own career, gingerly took the phone. Hello? Mr. Pierce? Yes, this is the lead flight attendant. Yes, sir. Yes, he's a marshal, sir. But she is... Yes. Yes, I understand. Brooks turned to Bryce, looking like he was about to vomit. Agent Donovan, Mr. Pierce says... He says if you arrest Ms. Wilde, the airline will file a formal complaint against you for misconduct and excessive force. He says she's a VIP and you should sit in 4B. Bryce stared at Brooks. The airline was trying to overrule federal law to protect a donor. It was corrupt, it was dangerous, and it was exactly what he expected. Put him on speaker, Bryce ordered. Brooks did. Listen to me, whoever you are. Connor Pierce's voice boomed from the tiny speaker, smooth and arrogant. Francesca Wilde is a diamond status flyer and a shareholder. If you touch one hair on her head, I will have your badge. I will bury you in paperwork so deep you'll need a snorkel. Sit down, shut up, and let the lady fly. The cabin was silent. Margot Brooks in 2C was still recording, capturing every word of the corruption. Bryce leaned in close to the phone. Mr. Pierce, this is Senior Agent Donovan. You are currently obstructing a federal investigation. Everything you are saying is being recorded by the CVR, cockpit voice recorder, and multiple witnesses. I am removing this passenger for interfering with a flight crew and threatening a federal officer. If you attempt to stop me, I will have you indicted for obstruction of justice. Have a nice day. Bryce nodded to Brooks to hang up. Brooks did, his hands shaking. Francesca looked at the phone, then at Bryce. The reality hadn't set in yet. She still thought money was a shield that physics couldn't penetrate. You're bluffing, she sneered. You wouldn't dare. 2 airport police officers appeared at the cabin door, breathless. They looked at Bryce, saw the badge, and immediately deferred to him. Gentlemen, Bryce said, this passenger is refusing to deplane after causing a disturbance and threatening the flight crew. Escort her off. Don't touch me! Francesca shrieked as the officers moved in. She grabbed the armrests of seat 1A. I am not moving! This is my seat! I paid for it! You're all fired! I'll sue the department! I'll sue the city! The officers weren't gentle. They were used to drunks and disorderly conduct, but a rich woman in a silk blouse screaming profanities was a different flavor of chaos. They pried her fingers loose. As they dragged her down the aisle, Francesca thrashed, kicking her legs. Her shoe, a Jimmy Choo pump, flew off and hit a businessman in the chest. You're nothing! She screamed back at Bryce, who was calmly sanitizing the armrests of seat 1A with a wet wipe. You hear me? You're a nobody. I will end you. I'll have your job by morning. Bryce didn't look up. He waited until her screeching voice faded into the jet bridge. Sorry for the delay, folks, Bryce said to the stunned cabin. He finally sat in 1A. He looked at Brooks Hale, who was trembling in the galley. I'll take a black coffee now, please. The plane door closed, but on the jet bridge, Francesca Wilde was not done. She was standing with the officers, smoothing her hair, her eyes burning with a cold, calculating fury. She pulled her phone out again. Connor, she said, her voice deadly calm now. He humiliated me. I want him destroyed. I want his name. I want his address. And I want to know everything about him. We aren't just getting him fired. We're going to ruin his life. She looked back at the closed plane door. Nobody says no to a Wilde. She didn't know it yet, but the video Margot Brooks had taken was already uploading to the cloud. And she didn't know that Genevieve Steele, the director of the Federal Air Marshal Service, was about to receive a very interesting phone call. The war had just begun. By the time Flight 82 touched down at JFK, the world had already changed for Bryce Donovan. He just didn't know it yet. The flight itself had been eerily quiet after Francesca's removal. The passengers in first class had spent the 5-hour journey exchanging whispered theories and glancing nervously at the empty seat in 1A, which Bryce had occupied with stoic silence. He hadn't slept. He had spent the flight writing his incident report, documenting every timestamp, every slur, and every threat. In his line of work, paperwork was the shield that protected the sword. As the plane taxied to the gate, Bryce turned on his phone. Usually, he would have a few texts from his wife, Sarah, maybe a notification from the bureau. Today, his phone nearly vibrated out of his hand. It was a continuous, seizure-inducing buzz of notifications. Text messages, missed calls, news alerts, and emails flooded the screen so fast he couldn't read them. 147 missed calls. 3,031 new emails. He frowned, tapping the screen to stop the scrolling. A text from his precinct commander, Captain Harris, sat at the top. "Do not exit the terminal. Secure area. Call me EMM." Bryce felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He hadn't even unbuckled his seatbelt. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York," Brooks Hale announced over the intercom, his voice sounding thin and strained. "Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off." Bryce stood up immediately. He grabbed his duffel. He needed to get ahead of whatever this was. As he stepped into the jet bridge, he wasn't met by the usual solitude of a late-night arrival. He was met by a wall of suits. 4 men in dark tailored suits and earpieces stood blocking the exit path. They weren't FAMs. They were private security. "Mr. Donovan," the lead suit said. He was a thick-necked man with a scar running through his eyebrow. "Please come with us. Private exit." "I'm a federal agent," Bryce said, his hand instinctively hovering near his waist, though he knew drawing a weapon here was suicide. "I don't go anywhere with private security. Step aside." "Mr. Pierce insists," the man said, stepping forward. "Mr. Pierce can wait," Bryce snapped. He shouldered past the man, using his size and momentum to break their line. They stumbled but didn't pursue. They knew better than to physically tackle an armed federal agent in a sterile area. Bryce made it to the terminal concourse and stopped. Every television screen in the waiting area, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, was playing the same footage. It was a shaky video, clearly filmed from a cell phone. It showed Bryce standing over Francesca. But the audio was garbled and the angle was deceptive. It looked like he was looming over a defenseless woman. The caption on the bottom of the screen read, "Air Marshal assaults heiress. Allegations of brutality." On the screen, Francesca Wilde was sitting on a plush sofa in a television studio. She looked nothing like the banshee from the plane. She was wearing a modest black dress, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked fragile, broken. "He called me terrible names," Francesca sobbed on mute, the subtitles doing the heavy lifting. "He said I didn't belong in first class. He said he was the law and he could do whatever he wanted to my body. I was terrified. I just wanted to go home to my children." Bryce felt the blood drain from his face. She didn't have children. She had 2 Afghan hounds. He walked past a newsstand. The New York Post app on a bystander's iPad showed the headline, "Sky-High Terror. Rogue Agent Attacks Wild Hotel Heiress." "Hey!" someone shouted. Bryce turned. A man holding a coffee cup was pointing at him. "That's him! That's the guy from the video!" Phones went up. Flashes went off. A mob mentality shifted in the air, instantaneous and dangerous. Bryce pulled his hood up, kept his head down, and moved. He needed extraction. He dialed the emergency line for the New York field office. "Donovan?" a voice answered. It wasn't the dispatcher. It was Genevieve Steele. "Director?" Bryce breathed out. "I'm compromised." "I know." Steele's voice was crisp, cutting through the noise in his head. "Do not engage. Do not speak to anyone. Go to level 3, door 4. There is a black SUV with government plates. Get in. We are bringing you in." "She's lying, Jen. She's lying about everything." "I know that, too," Steele said, her tone unyielding. "But right now, the truth doesn't matter. The narrative is outrunning us. Get in the car, Bryce. The wolves are at the door." The conference room at the Federal Air Marshal Service's New York field office was usually a place of debriefings and tactical planning. Today, it felt like an execution chamber. Bryce sat at one end of a long mahogany table. His badge and gun lay in the center, surrendered upon entry. Across from him sat 3 people. In the middle was Assistant Director Miller, a bureaucrat who cared more about budget allocation than field ops. To his left was a representative from Internal Affairs. And to his right, smug and impeccably dressed in a navy pinstripe suit, was Connor Pierce. "I don't understand why a civilian is present at a disciplinary hearing," Bryce said, his voice steady despite the rage boiling in his veins. "Mr. Pierce is representing the airline," Miller said, refusing to meet Bryce's eyes. "Given the public nature of the incident, The department has agreed to full transparency with our corporate partners. Transparency? Bryce scoffed. You mean collusion? This man threatened me while the incident was active. He is a suspect, not a partner. Connor Pierce smiled. It was a shark's smile, all teeth and no warmth. He opened a leather folder. Agent Donovan, let's cut the theatrics. The video is damning. You physically intimidated a Diamond Medallion member. You abused your authority to steal a seat you felt entitled to. And when she politely declined, you arrested her on trumped-up charges. She refused a direct order from a federal officer during a security protocol, Bryce stated flatly. She assaulted a flight attendant verbally and threatened the safety of the flight. I followed procedure to the letter. Procedure? Pierce laughed. You call dragging a woman off a plane by her hair procedure? I didn't touch her. The airport police removed her, and she wasn't dragged by her hair. That's not what the lawsuit says. Pierce slid a thick document across the table. Ms. Wild is suing the airline, the TSA, the DHS, and you personally for $50 million. Civil rights violations, emotional distress, assault, battery, and defamation. Bryce looked at the document. Defamation. She called me a thug. And you called her a criminal, Pierce countered. In front of witnesses. Assistant Director Miller cleared his throat. Bryce, the optics are catastrophic. The hashtag #FireTheThug is trending #1 globally. The White House press secretary was asked about it this morning. We have to stop the bleeding. So you're hanging me out to dry? Bryce asked quietly. We are placing you on administrative leave without pay pending a full investigation, Miller said. Indefinitely. Without pay? Bryce stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I have a mortgage. I have a kid in college. You know I followed the book. The book doesn't account for the Wild family's influence. The internal affairs rep spoke for the first time. They are threatening to pull all contracts with the airline if you aren't disciplined. That's thousands of jobs, Donovan. It's bigger than you. Connor Pierce leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Look, Bryce. Can I call you Bryce? Just apologize. Issue a public statement saying you were stressed, you overreacted, and you're sorry to Ms. Wild. Do that, and maybe we can convert this to a suspension with pay. We might even let you keep your pension. Bryce looked at Pierce. He looked at the badge sitting on the table, the symbol of 20 years of service. He thought about the sleepless nights, the missed birthdays, the danger he walked into every time he stepped on a plane. Then he looked at Pierce's smug, pampered face. You think you can buy the truth? Bryce said. I know I can, Pierce replied. I already have. Bryce picked up his personal phone from the table. I'm not apologizing, and I'm not resigning. If you want my badge, you're going to have to take it from me in federal court. Then you're done, Pierce said coldly. We're going to release your personnel file. We're going to leak every complaint ever filed against you, every parking ticket, every missed credit card payment. We will paint you as an unstable, angry man who finally snapped. By the time we're done, you won't be able to get a job as a mall Santa. Bryce turned to Miller. You're letting him threaten a federal agent in your office? Miller looked down at his papers. You're dismissed, Mr. Donovan. Bryce walked out. He didn't look back. But as he stepped into the elevator, his phone buzzed. It wasn't a threat this time. It was an encrypted message from an unknown number. Meet me at the diner on 9th and 43rd. Come alone. I have the unedited tape. M. The diner was a relic of old New York, chrome, neon, and grease. Bryce sat in the back booth, his back to the wall, watching the door. He felt naked without his sidearm. 10 minutes later, a woman walked in. She was sharp, dressed in a power suit that looked like it had seen a long day in court. It was the woman from Seat 2C, Margot Brooks. She slid into the booth opposite him, placing a sleek black hard drive on the table. You look like hell, Agent Donovan, she said, signaling the waitress for coffee. I've had a bad day, Bryce said. You're the lawyer. Margot Brooks, Civil Rights and Criminal Defense. She extended a hand. Bryce shook it. Her grip was firm. And I hate bullies. Francesca Wilde is a big bully, Bryce said. She's an amateur, Margot corrected. Connor Pierce is the bully. Francesca is just the weapon. Margot opened her laptop. I saw the news. I saw the edited clip they're running. It's a masterpiece of editing. They cut out her racial slurs. They cut out the part where she threatened the flight crew. They even cut out the part where you showed your badge, making it look like you just started barking orders. They have the narrative, Bryce said. They have the money. But they don't have this. Margot turned the laptop screen toward him. She pressed play. The video was crystal clear. It started from the moment Bryce walked up to seat 1A. The audio was perfect. This isn't the back of the bus, and I'm certainly not moving for someone dressed like help. The slur rang out in the diner. The video continued. It captured Francesca's entitlement, her aggression, her explicit threat to use Connor Pierce to destroy Bryce. It captured Brooks Hale looking terrified. It captured Bryce's incredible restraint. Most importantly, it captured the phone call. Connor, he says if you arrest Ms. Wilde, the airline will file a formal complaint. He says she's a VIP and you should sit in 4B. And then, Bryce's response. And finally, Francesca's parting shot on the jet bridge, which Margot had moved to the window to film. I want his name. I want his address. We aren't just getting him fired. We're going to ruin his life. Bryce watched it, feeling a weight lift off his chest. This proves everything. It proves perjury, Margot said, her eyes gleaming. It proves conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation. It proves blackmail. And because Connor Pierce used a carriage service, the phone lines, to facilitate a crime, it's wire fraud and racketeering. Why are you giving this to me? Bryce asked. You could sell this to TMZ for 6 figures. I told you, Margot smiled. I hate bullies, and I checked into Connor Pierce. He's been doing this for years. Bumping passengers, firing staff who don't go tow to his rich friends, cutting corners on safety regulations to save pennies. He's a cancer. You're just the first person who stood up to him. So what do? We don't release it, a third voice said. Bryce froze. He looked up. Standing at the end of the booth was Genevieve Steele, the director of the Federal Air Marshal Service. She was wearing a trench coat and looked like she hadn't slept in a week, but her eyes were razor sharp. Director? Bryce started to stand. Sit down, Bryce. Steele slid into the booth next to Margot. Ms. Brooks, excellent work. My office has been tracking Pierce's financial irregularities for months, but we never had a smoking gun on the obstruction charges. This video? This is a nuclear bomb. So we detonate it, Bryce said. Clear my name. Not yet, Steele said. If we release it now, they'll spin it. They'll claim it's a deep fake. They'll bury it in expert testimony and news cycle fatigue. We need them to commit fully. Commit? Bryce asked. They already suspended me without pay. I want them to fire you, Steele said calmly. Bryce stared at her. Excuse me? I want them to file the lawsuit, Steele continued. I want Francesca to testify under oath in a deposition that you assaulted her. I want Connor Pierce to sign the affidavit swearing that you were the aggressor. I want them to put their lies on federal record. Margot nodded slowly, catching on. The perjury trap. Exactly, Steele said. Let them dig the hole. Let them think they've won. Let them destroy your reputation for 48 more hours. Let Francesca go on The View, Oprah, and Ellen. Let her tell her lies to the world. And me? Bryce asked. I just sit there and take it? You go home, Steele said. Hug your wife. Disable your internet. Trust me. When we drop the hammer, we aren't just going to get your job back. We are going to dismantle the entire Wild Empire and send Connor Pierce to federal prison for 20 years. Steele reached into her coat and pulled out a burner phone. She slid it to Bryce. This is your line to me. They tapped your personal phone an hour ago. Bryce looked at the two women, the lawyer and the spy master. He realized he wasn't the victim in this story anymore. He was the bait. "All right," Bryce said, taking the burner phone. "Let's catch some predators." Steele smiled. "Oh, we're going to catch them, Bryce. And then we're going to skin them alive." As Bryce left the diner, the neon sign flickered above him. The headline on a passing bus displayed Francesca's face with the caption, "Justice for Francesca." Bryce pulled his collar up and walked into the rain. Let them have their moment. The storm was coming, and he was bringing the thunder. The following 48 hours were a masterclass in public destruction. Bryce Donovan sat in his small living room in Queens, the blinds drawn, watching his face being broadcast on every major network. The narrative had calcified. He was a loose cannon, a symbol of government overreach, a man who had terrified a beloved philanthropist. Francesca Wilde was everywhere. She wept on morning talk shows, clutching a tissue as she described the trauma of being told no. She hinted at PTSD. She announced the launch of a foundation for victims of travel aggression. She was playing the role of her life, and the world was eating it up. But beneath the surface, the trap Genevieve Steele and Margot Brooks had set was tightening. The venue for the final nail in the coffin was the deposition room at Pierce, Sterling and Associates, the law firm representing the airline. It was a glass-walled aquarium of corporate greed overlooking Manhattan. Bryce sat next to Margot. He wore a simple suit looking tired and beaten, exactly as instructed. Across the table sat Francesca, looking radiant in a white dress that screamed innocence, flanked by Connor Pierce and a phalanx of lawyers. "Mr. Donovan," the lead attorney for the airline began, a camera recording the proceedings. "We are here to formalize the complaint. Before we proceed to the settlement phase, where we will discuss the terms of your termination and the public apology, we need to establish the facts." "My client is ready," Margot said quietly. Francesca smirked. She checked her nails. She looked at Bryce with pitying eyes. "I just want this over with," she sighed. "I want to feel safe again." "Ms. Wilde," Margot said, opening a file, "I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You are under oath. Do you understand that lying here is a federal crime? Perjury?" "I don't lie," Francesca snapped. "I have nothing to hide." "Excellent," Margot said. She didn't look up. "Did Agent Donovan identify himself as a federal officer before or after he allegedly assaulted you?" "He never identified himself," Francesca insisted, leaning into the microphone. "He just loomed over me. He shouted. He grabbed my arm. I didn't know who he was until he pulled out that gun." "He pulled his gun?" Margot asked, her pen pausing. "Yes, he waved it around. He pointed it at me," Francesca cried, adding a new embellishment to her story. Connor Pierce nodded encouragingly. "And the racial slurs?" Margot asked. "You claim in your affidavit that Agent Donovan used specific anti-white slurs against you. Is that correct?" "Yes," Francesca said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "He called me white trash. He said I was privileged scum and that he was going to teach me a lesson about the streets." Bryce clenched his jaw so hard he thought a tooth might crack. He stared at the table. "Mr. Pierce," Margot turned her attention to the executive. "You were on the phone with Ms. Wilde during the incident. Did you hear Agent Donovan threaten her?" "I did," Connor Pierce said, smoothing his silk tie. "I heard him clearly. He was unhinged. He threatened to crash the plane. That's why I ordered the crew to cooperate with him. I was trying to save lives." "And did you, at any point, threaten Agent Donovan's job or attempt to coerce him into abandoning his duties?" "Absolutely not," Pierce laughed. "I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. I simply asked him to de-escalate. He refused." Margot nodded. She pushed 2 pieces of paper across the table. "These are the sworn affidavits. They summarize what you've just said. If you sign them, they become official legal testimony. If they are found to be false, well, you know the consequences." "Give me the pen," Francesca demanded. She signed with a flourish, dotting the I in wild with a circle. Connor Pierce signed his next, a bold, arrogant scrawl. There, Pierce said, slamming the pen down. Now, let's talk about the settlement. We want his pension. We want a public apology broadcast on CNN, and we want him to personally pay Ms. Wilde's legal fees. Margot closed her folder. She looked at Bryce. For the first time in days, Bryce smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We aren't settling, Margot said. Excuse me, Pierce scoffed. You have no leverage. You have a thug and a badge he doesn't deserve. Actually, Margot said, reaching into her bag, we have the cloud. She pulled out the hard drive. What is that? Francesca asked, her voice faltering. This, Margot said, is the unedited 4K video from Seat 2C. And this, she pointed to a second drive, is the audio recording from the cockpit voice recorder, which Director Steele subpoenaed this morning. It captures both sides of your phone call, Mr. Pierce. The room went so silent you could hear the air conditioning humming. That's illegal, Pierce stammered, his face turning the color of ash. You can't record a private conversation. It's not private on a federal aircraft during a security incident, Bryce spoke up, his voice returning to its deep, commanding rumble. And perjury isn't a private matter either. Margot stood up. The deposition is over, but don't leave the building. There are people in the lobby who want to talk to you. Francesca and Connor rushed to the elevators, ignoring their lawyer's frantic whispers. They needed to get out. They needed to spin this. Call the station! Francesca screamed at Connor as they hit the lobby floor. Tell them it's a fake! Tell them he used AI! Shut up, Francesca! Connor roared, sweating profusely. I need to call my fixers! But as the elevator doors opened, they weren't met by the lobby. They were met by a wall of light. Director Steele had not been idle. She had convened a press conference in the lobby of the building. Dozens of reporters, tipped off about a major break in the Wilde case, were waiting. And behind them, on a massive projection screen usually used for corporate branding, the video was playing. The real video. The entire lobby watched in stunned silence as the 10-foot-tall image of Francesca Wilde screamed, I'm not moving for someone dressed like help. They watched her kick the seat. They watched her poke Bryce in the chest. They heard the slur. Then came the audio of Connor Pierce, booming through the lobby speakers. If you touch one hair on her head, I will have your badge. I will bury you. She's a VIP. Sit down and shut up. Francesca froze. She stood by the elevator bank, watching her own social suicide broadcast in high definition. The reporters turned. They saw the woman on the screen, then the woman in the lobby. The transition was instant. The cameras that had been loving her for 2 days now turned on her like a pack of starving wolves. Miss Wilde, did you lie about the gun? Mr. Pierce, is it true you threatened a federal agent to protect a donor? Ms. Wilde, are you a racist? Francesca stumbled back, shielding her face. No, it's edited. It's not true. He hurt me. But nobody was listening. The comments on the live stream were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Francesca lied, got justice for Donovan, lock her up. Then the crowd parted. Bryce Donovan walked out of the elevator, followed by Margot Brooks and Genevieve Steele. He didn't look at the cameras. He walked straight toward Connor Pierce. Pierce tried to puff up his chest. You can't do this. I own this town. You don't own anything anymore, Steele said, stepping forward. She flashed her credentials. Connor Pierce, you are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to impede a federal officer. 2 agents in windbreakers moved in, slapping cuffs on Pierce's wrists. The click was the loudest sound in the room. You're making a mistake, Pierce screamed as they dragged him away. I'll buy your agency. I'll fire all of you. Francesca watched him go, her eyes wide with terror. She turned to run back into the elevator, but Bryce stepped in her path. He didn't loom. He didn't shout. He just stood there, an immovable object. You, she whispered, trembling. You ruined me." "You did this to yourself," Bryce said calmly. "I just turned on the lights." "I'm leaving," she spat, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "I'm going to Paris. You'll never see me again." She tried to push past him. "Actually," Steele said, holding up a tablet, "you aren't going to Paris, or London, or even New Jersey." Steele tapped the screen and turned it around. It was the Department of Homeland Security's official no-fly list database. At the top of the list, flagged in bright red, was Willed Francesca. "As of 5 minutes ago," Steele said, "you are designated a Tier 1 threat to aviation security. You are banned from all commercial flights in the United States, permanently." Francesca stared at the screen. The blood drained from her face until she looked like a wax doll. "Permanently?" she choked out. "But I'm Francesca Wilde. I travel. That's what I do." "Not anymore," Bryce said. "Now, you take the bus." The unraveling of the Wilde dynasty began not in a courtroom, but in the boardroom of the Wilde Hotel Group, 48 hours after the arrest. The oak-paneled room was dead silent. At the head of the table sat the chairman, a man who had known Francesca's father. On the wall screens, the company stock ticker was bleeding red, down 62% in 2 days. The hashtag #JewBoycottWilde was trending higher than the Super Bowl. Cancellations for weddings, corporate retreats, and luxury stays were flooding the system at a rate that threatened immediate bankruptcy. When Francesca tried to storm into the meeting, confident she could charm her way out of a little misunderstanding, she found her keycard deactivated. 2 large security guards, ironically, men who looked very much like Bryce Donovan in stature, blocked her path. "Ms. Wilde," one of them said, his voice devoid of the deference she was used to, "you have been removed from the premises. Your personal items have been boxed and are waiting at the curb." "You can't do this!" she screamed, pounding on the frosted glass doors. "I am the face of this company." "That is exactly the problem," the chairman's voice came over the intercom. "You're toxic, Francesca. The board has voted unanimously. You are stripped of your title, your salary, and your ceremonial seat. We are also freezing your expense accounts to cover the impending shareholder lawsuits." She was escorted out of the building she thought she owned, past a gauntlet of paparazzi who captured every second of her mascara-streaked meltdown. But the corporate exile was just the appetizer. The main course was served in federal district court 3 months later. The trial of United States versus Wilde and Pierce became the most watched legal event of the decade. Connor Pierce, realizing his friends in high places had abandoned him, didn't last a week. Faced with the mountain of evidence Genevieve Steele had compiled, not just the plane incident, but years of bribery and safety violations, he cut a deal. To save himself from a 20-year sentence, Pierce turned on Francesca with the viciousness of a cornered rat. On the witness stand, Pierce looked smaller, his arrogance replaced by a sweaty desperation. "She told me to ruin him," Pierce testified, avoiding Francesca's burning gaze from the defense table. "She said she didn't care if he was a federal agent. She wanted his badge, his pension, and his dignity. She explicitly asked me to use the airline's legal team to bury him in debt so he couldn't fight back." "And did she admit to lying about the gun?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Pierce said. "She laughed about it. She said, 'Who are they going to believe, a black man in a hoodie or a woman in Chanel?'" A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Bryce, sitting in the back row next to Margot, remained stone-faced. He knew exactly who people usually believed. When it was Francesca's turn to take the stand, she disregarded her lawyer's advice to remain silent. She believed she could act her way out of it. She wore a modest gray cardigan and minimal makeup, trying to project the image of a confused, fragile victim. It was a disaster. The prosecutor, a sharp-witted woman named AUSA Reynolds, dismantled her in 10 minutes. "Ms. Wilde," Reynolds said, playing the clip of the incident for the 100th time, "you claimed you feared for your life. Yet here, at timestamp 0045, you are seen poking a federal agent in the chest. Is that standard behavior for someone in mortal terror? I was in shock, Francesca stammered. And the racial slurs? Reynolds pressed. Was that shock too, or was that just who you are? I don't see color, Francesca cried out, looking to the jury for sympathy that wasn't there. I have a diverse staff. You have servants, Reynolds corrected sharply. And when one of them didn't obey you, you tried to destroy him using the federal court system as your personal weapon. You committed perjury, Ms. Wilde. You signed a sworn document knowing it was a lie. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Francesca didn't cry. She went catatonic. She stared straight ahead, unable to process a world where her tears didn't work as currency. The sentencing hearing was the final blow. The judge, Honorable Sarah Vance, looked down at Francesca with palpable disdain. Miss Wilde, Judge Vance said, you represent the worst kind of corruption, the belief that your status elevates you above the law. You treated a federal air marshal, a man sworn to protect your life, as an inconvenience to be discarded. You wasted taxpayer money, you slandered a public servant, and you showed absolutely no remorse. I'm sorry, Francesca whispered, finally realizing the gravity of the moment. I'll pay a fine. I'll pay double. This isn't a parking ticket, Judge Vance snapped. You are sentenced to 30 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are remanded into custody immediately. Immediately? Francesca shrieked as the bailiff moved in. But I have to pack. I have dogs. Your staff can handle the dogs, the bailiff said, clicking the handcuffs onto her wrists. This time, there were no diamonds on her arms, only steel. Bryce walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding sunlight. The press was swarming, shouting questions, but he felt a sense of quiet detachment. He saw Margot Brooks leaning against her car, a triumphant smile on her face. 30 months, Margot said, and Pierce got 12 years. Justice served? Bryce asked, repeating the question she had asked him months ago. It's a start, Margot replied. But the real justice? That happened this morning. What do you mean? The prison transport. Margot grinned, her eyes dancing. The Bureau of Prisons doesn't do private transfers for anyone, not even heiresses. She was put on the standard transport bus to the correctional facility in Danbury. And, Margot continued, savoring the detail, it's 95 degrees out today. The air conditioning unit on bus 404 failed halfway through the Bronx. She's currently sitting in a metal box, handcuffed to a woman named Knuckles, who is doing 5 years for racketeering. No water, no first-class legroom, and absolutely no way to call a manager. Bryce laughed, a deep, resonant sound that felt like a weight finally dropping from his shoulders. He pictured Francesca Wilde, the woman who wouldn't move for the help, now sweating in the back of a broken-down bus, just another number in the system she tried to weaponize. Karma, Bryce said, looking at the sky where a plane was banking over the city, free and clear. And she has a wicked sense of humor. Go home, Bryce, Margot said, opening her door. You've earned it. Bryce walked to the subway station. He swiped his card, still the same Metro card, still the same turnstile. He stood on the platform, surrounded by everyday people. A nurse exhausted from a shift, a construction worker covered in dust, a student reading a textbook. He took a seat on the hard plastic bench. There was no extra leg room. The air smelled of ozone and hot steel. It was perfect. A young woman next to him reading a tablet looked up. She did a double take, her eyes widening. Excuse me, she said tentatively. Are you the Air Marshal? Bryce tensed for a second, the old instinct flaring up. The one who stood up to the lady? She asked. The one on the news? Bryce looked at her. He saw respect in her eyes, not judgment. He relaxed, his shoulders dropping. Yeah, Bryce said softly. That was me. She smiled, a genuine warm expression. Thank you. For showing us that we don't have to take it. Bryce nodded. The train arrived with a rush of wind, the doors sliding open. He stepped on board, not as a symbol, not as a victim, but as a man who had held the line. As the train rattled into the dark tunnel, moving toward the light at the end, Bryce Donovan finally closed his eyes and rested. The world is full of people who believe that their bank account gives them the right to treat others like furniture. Francesca Wilde and Connor Pierce learned the hard way that dignity isn't something you can buy, and justice isn't something you can sell. Bryce Donovan didn't just defend a seat. He defended the principle that respect is non-negotiable, no matter who you are or what you wear. As Bryce sat on that subway train, he knew the fight wasn't really over. There would always be another Francesca, another Connor, but he also knew that for every tyrant, there is a camera, a witness, and a truth waiting to be told. He closed his eyes, finally at peace, listening to the rhythm of the tracks. Like, share, and subscribe. If this story got your blood boiling and your justice bone tingling, smash that like button and share this video. Let's remind the world that nobody, absolutely nobody, is above the law. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story where the arrogant get what they deserve. Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were Bryce? See you in the next video.